talk to maybe another business owner, or talk to someone. Just because you talk to a virtual assistant doesn't necessarily mean you have to hire them. If, someone wanted to contact me, I have these questions, that would be fine. I wouldn't mind talking to them, so, just ask around, ask people, or if you have emails for a virtual assistant, shoot them an email, or if you're online, shoot them an email and ask them questions. If they're good enough, and if they're classy enough, they will answer any questions that person has without expecting them to automatically become a client.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, and we're always here to help. Now, today we have another great guest, and this is an expert episode, and it's Trish, and I'm going to mispronounce your last name, Lewellyn?
Lewellyn. Mm-hmm.
All right, I made my way through it. So, but Trish, we're going to talk a lot about administrative assistants or administrative people, how to get an assistant, hiring one, how to find one, what you might consider when you're looking for one, determining if you need one, whether you need an administrative assistant, a virtual assistant, kind of knowing what to look for and what kind of expertise, how, maybe a bit of remote working with COVID and whatnot, how that's affected things, a little bit difference between doing an employee versus independent contractor. Lots of things we could talk about. We'll see how much we get through on the list, but lots of fun things to talk about. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Trish.
Thank you very much, Devin. I'm looking forward to it.
So before we dive into the area of expertise, maybe just give a bit of a background, or a couple minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, and tell everybody a little bit about your background, your experience, and why you're an expert on this area.
Well, expert, you say I'm an expert. I just say I'm working at it. I've been an admin assistant for, well over 20 years. Most of the time working in an office, just like everyone else. Worked for many CEOs, vice presidents, entrepreneurs, but I got tired of working 50, 60 hours a week and then still bringing work home with me. And many years ago, someone mentioned to me, this was long before it was even known that well, about working virtually. So I had someone who gave me some names to start with, and I did it just kind of part-time to see if I could do it and what have you. Well, what it came down to, I was doing so well and I was getting so tired of working all those hours and not having any kind of life that I quit my job in the office. I started doing this full time, and I've been doing it ever since. And it's been over 12 years now that I've been a virtual assistant. I can work as many or as few hours as I want. I still have a life. I can stop and do things during the day. I have a lot of animals. If I need to take them to the vet, I can. I don't have to worry about asking someone's permission or permission to go to the doctor or have my eyes checked or just to go shopping. I can do it as long as I meet deadlines. I can do what I want. So that's why, in a nutshell, I switched from in-office to virtual.
No, definitely makes sense. And so then appreciate that bit of that background. So now maybe kind of jumping into a bit of the topic at hand, so to speak. I guess the first question I would have is, especially if you're talking in a lot of our audiences, startups and small businesses, is, and they've kind of heard, hey, I'm getting overloaded, have a lot of things to get done, never have enough hours in the day. So they kind of say, hey, it'd be nice to have an assistant or someone that I could offload some of that or free up some of my time or be able to focus on it. So as you're kind of thinking about whether it's a virtual assistant or administrative assistant, which I think is similar or synonymous other than one maybe in the office versus remotely, what are some of the tasks that you can start to look at to offload, or if you're saying, hey, should I bring one on, or what are a lot of the roles that oftentimes that administrative assistant or virtual assistant would fill?
Well, just a quick FYI, a lot of people, especially now, are going with virtual assistants because they don't have to have an office. Virtual assistants use their own equipment, so companies don't have to put money into that. virtual assistants, independent contractors are liable for their own taxes, their own insurance. So that's another thing off the plate of an owner or someone just getting started.
Mm.
One thing I've learned over the years with any kind of a new business or anybody who's starting a business and want to grow their business, if they're spending more time on the paperwork or invoicing or what have you, and not being able to grow their business, then they need help. And a virtual assistant doesn't have to be full-time. I have many clients that I only work 5 hours a week for. So it doesn't have to be 10 hours, it doesn't have to be 20 hours, and it certainly doesn't have to be 40 hours. 2 or 3 or 5, generally with most virtual assistants, there's no minimum. At least there isn't with me. If you just need help 2 or 3 hours a week, that's fine. If you need help 5 hours, that's fine too. But if you find you're at the point where you're not being able to grow your business, you're so bogged down in the paperwork that you can't move forward, then you need help, even if it's just a few hours a week.
So now one question, and I think that's a great answer. And one question maybe piggyback on that, and there's a whole bunch of fun questions we could ask. But so let's say I said, okay, I am bogged down. I need, and it could be everything from I need a couple hours assistance a week all the way up to I need 40 hours or I need even more than that, whatever that range is.
Mhm.
Say, okay, I need to find a virtual assistant. How do you go about doing that in the sense that, let's say if I don't already know someone to reach out to, or I don't do it, do you go through an employment firm? Do you go through a Google search? Do you ask around and ask for referrals? Do you go to LinkedIn? Or kind of, if you're saying, okay, I made a realization, I think I need to hire a virtual assistant. How do you even go about tackling or finding one?
Actually, it's yes to all of those because I've gotten clients from all of those. I've had people contact me through LinkedIn. There's all kinds of various sources out there. Indeed, you'll find a lot of people putting job applications for help wanted in Indeed or even ZipRecruiter. There's all kinds of resources now popping up for companies that just specialize in hiring out virtual assistants. A few years ago, there were none. Now they're popping up all over the place, and you can find some very good, reputable ones. So, and of course, word of mouth is everything in any kind of business. So I've gotten them always. So those are just a few of the ones, but you can just go on Indeed and put in a job source where, I need a virtual assistant, or if you want to be more specialized, you can do that. But those are any number of the ways that you can find help.
So now one question I'll follow up, and it's a hard, maybe it's not a hard question. I think it's a hard question, which is, so, if you're doing a virtual, a lot of times you say, I know I need someone because I don't have enough time in the day, but I really don't know what the position is, or I don't know exactly what I'm going to offload, or it's going to be kind of figuring it out as I go along, so to speak, of, hey, I know I have a lot of paperwork, I have odd jobs, I have things I need to take care of. Do you need, or how well defined do you need to have that position when you're starting to look for someone to say, do you say, hey, I need a whole bunch of assistance in these areas and I don't know exactly how much time? Because I think a lot of, if you're a startup or, if you're just getting into it and this
Right.
first time you've done it, you don't know how much you can offload or how much time it will save or how much things to do until you actually get going. So any thoughts or ideas as to how you kind of start to figure that out, or you just hire someone and figure it out along the way? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Actually, especially if it's a company that's just starting out, they can just place a general ad or just talk to someone and say, I possibly need help in these areas, but I don't know for sure. And then when you get on the phone for an interview with someone, then you two, especially if the virtual assistant is experienced, you can talk through what your needs may be, where you find yourself, or what job tasks that you find the owner doing that you absolutely hate. Because if the job owner is doing those, then he's putting it off. He's not really liking to do it, so he puts it off. He's only doing it halfway. So that's a good way to judge if, because most people hate doing the stuff that I love to do. I love sitting in front of a computer doing the mundane stuff, the boring stuff that most people think of doing. They hate that. I love it. So if I can take those off their plate, then they find that they're freed up for a lot more important things to do. Say, like if someone hates invoicing, okay, you hate it, I love it, I'll do it, It can be as simple as that. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it. It's like most things in life.
So is that almost now kind of, because I like that answer, is that almost a way that you can, in some degree, filter out who would be a good virtual assistant? In other words, you know, if you're saying, hey, I have a lot that they can help you and say, hey, here are some of the things that I can do. I'm experienced in, I've helped other people. And it kind of shows that they know what they're doing and they've already done this, so they can help you along the way. Seems like that's kind of a good way to almost figure out who is experienced or who would be a good match.
Correct. And some of that should show up on your resume, but again, sometimes resumes are just talk. But yeah, if you get to talking with someone, you can say, well, I've done, the owner could say, you know, I have a lot of invoicing that I need to do, and I really hate to do it. And it takes up so much of my time. Usually an experienced virtual assistant will say, hey, I've done this for many, many years. I've done this for so-and-so different businesses. So that way you can kind of gauge what their background is, how they're liking it. Or same way with calendar management. There's a lot of that nowadays, calendar email management.
Well, I think that's, you know, and I always joke, and especially on calendar management, I still tend to like to, that's one aspect. I don't know if I love it, but it's one that I'm too 8 over 10 over 2. I want to make sure that my calendar is right. So I would have a hard time, but I get that, one, we're getting overloaded with emails, and two, you're getting overloaded with calendars. Right. I look at my calendar and it's chock full every day, and I barely have time to breathe, so to speak, and I have to intentionally set time aside for. But I think that those are definitely areas that, you know, would be helpful, that people could say, hey, if you don't like these things. And I like that, you know, a lot of times it's starting with what are the things that you don't like to do that you put off, because a lot of times those are holding your business back because they're not getting done. And find someone else that does love them. And I think that that's a great idea. Find someone else that does, you know, have that passion, or at least that drive, and that wants to do that, so you can offload it.
Yeah, because so often owners, whether they be owners, entrepreneurs, or CEOs, they get stuck doing those things day after day after day that they hate doing, and they can't concentrate on growing their business. So if they put those things on someone else that they hate doing, they'll find that they can actually concentrate on other things, and maybe even have a life, you know, because that's part of it too. You want them not only to grow their business, but you want them to have time to themselves, or time for their families, and you want them to be able to enjoy the perks of the business they're trying to grow. So it makes sense to don't be so caught up in the day-to-day that you forget. Delegation is so important sometimes, that if you try to do everything yourself, you'll just find yourself just floundering.
No, I definitely agree on that. So, and now kind of shifting gears slightly, but still on the same topic, you know, one of the things that's been a large shift in a lot of companies, and it will be interesting to see how it continues to play out, is move towards more remote working, or more, you know, people working from home or different locations. And I have different opinion, you know, everybody has a different opinion as to whether or not it's going to last, which industries it's going to last in, how that will evolve, will be a hybrid model, and everything else. You know, one of the giving it, or putting, or my personal bias a bit to it is, you know, some people work well with working with people remotely, in the sense that they can manage it, and if you're, and you know, they can deal with it, they can have a good relationship. And there are other people, and probably more of me, I'm in the same boat, that, you know, I have a difficult time, out of sight, out of mind, that, you know, if I don't see them in the office, I can't stop by their office, I can't check in with them. Not that they don't do a good job, but I just never see them, and I don't remember to follow up. So as far as when you're looking at, should you do it in the office, should you not do it in the office, as a good virtual assistant, you know, how do you start to balance that? Or, you know, how do you figure out which one's right for you?
Well, you have to know your own personality. For me, working virtually, there's just nothing like it. I love it. I'm not one that I have to be in the office. I have to spend time commiserating with everybody else in the office. I don't need that. I'm one, I'd rather be by myself, do my work, get it done, and then have the rest of the time for myself. Just not one that I need to be there and chatting with everybody and finding out, you know, what their life is doing and what my life is doing. And, you know, you have to know your own personality. I know some people who are very close to me who could never do it, because they just don't have the motivation or the perseverance or the persistence to sit at home and do the work. They need to be around other people. I don't. You know, that
But-
that is what it is.
So let me ask a follow-up question to that though. But if you're looking and you're saying, I don't know which I need, I don't know if I need some in the office, I don't need, or I can do a virtual assistant, and they're doing it for the first time. I guess a couple questions. How do you know whether or not someone is good at managing, a virtual assistant is good at managing themselves from home or getting the work done? And, kind of how do you decide which one you need? Because there's a difference, if I'm in that one is knowing if the individual that is a virtual assistant or the administrative assistants, knowing what their person lines up with. But there are some people that, as a person that would be doing the hiring, they don't know which they need. So how do you how do you go about, is it experimentation, trying it out, or doing that? I don't know. Does that make sense?
Oh, well, it does. If you're talking about the owner wondering if they need somebody in the office or they can use someone virtually, sometimes it might come down to money. That's always an important thing. If they don't have the money for a big office, if they don't have the money for a lot of administrative equipment, copy machines, computers, then definitely virtual assistant is the way to go because they supply all their own things. They don't need to go to the office. So, if you're fine, the owner is fine working from home, well, then that's the way to go. That way they don't have to put rent in an office and all kinds of equipment. But, and to, again, some people, they don't necessarily want to just come into the office for maybe 3 or 4 hours a week. Virtual assistant wouldn't matter to them if it's just a couple hours a week. So there's many factors. It just depends on what your needs are, how your bottom line is. Because if you don't have to pay for a big office, if you don't have to pay for all the equipment, well then, go with the virtual assistant.
No, definitely makes sense. Now, one question and all these kind of piggyback off of each other, but, now if you're looking for, so let's say you've got the virtual assistant or the administrative, the question that I guess, and it would be one of my fears if I were to speak for kind of the startup, or that is one where you might have is that, okay, I find someone that does it for 3 or 4 hours a day or 3 or 4 hours a week, whatever. I get them trained up, I get them integrated into all that we're doing, and then they're going to find another position, or they're going to go, find someone else that's hire them or anything else. And they're saying, okay, I just put in all this time and effort to train them. And especially if they're virtual assistants, and so they're not even, quite as much tied in the office, then it's even more worried that you're going to put all this time and effort, and then a few months they're going to do. Is that a case? Is that a valid fear? Is it they're a lot of stability as far as once you find someone, they're generally set up to continue to assist you for a long period of time? Or is there a lot of turnover, or how does that work?
With virtual assistants, most virtual assistants are looking, whether it's 3 hours a week or 20 or 40 hours a week, they're looking for the long term because they don't want to keep switching. Where I think at least from my experience in the past, because I used to do a lot of hiring and firing too, people would come and go a lot working in an office. But with the virtual, they tend to, because a lot of times, like myself, I have clients that are 20 hours a week. I have clients that are 5 hours a week. I have clients that are 10 hours a week. So, I have different variations. So I can handle them differently. And I prefer, and most virtual assistants will tell you this, that they prefer someone that they can be with on the long run. They prefer someone they can grow with rather than changing up. Because if they're working 5 hours a week from someone, if they need more hours, they can get a client that has, well, they need me for 5 hours. So that fits in perfectly and still keep the old one rather than going from place to place to place.
No, that definitely makes sense. And I think it lays to, almost you're making the argument, which it definitely makes sense, that virtual assistants and people doing it remotely gives them better flexibility because now they are able to slot different people with different times. They're looking for long-term stability, but even if you can't hire someone full-time, they can still have that long-term because they're now saying, hey, I don't want to work with one client for 40 hours a week. I like to have a bit of my own flexibility so I can have 5 hours here, 10 hours here, and allows them to, while also maintain that long-term relationship.
Actually, I prefer that. I prefer different clients with different hours. It might be just my thing. I don't know, but it just seems like I don't have all my eggs in one basket, so to speak. If something should go wrong with one, I still have others to fall back on. So I guess I've been in the business world away from that too long. So I know what happens when you put all your eggs in one basket.
That's fair enough.
I've been there, done that.
Well, I've peppered you with a few other questions. Any other things that people are kind of looking into this, kind of getting going on it or thinking about it that they should consider? Other things that they should be weighing as they look to maybe hire one or find one, or whether or not they should get going? Other things they should consider.
Well, just when they're speaking to them, whether it's a formal or informal interview, you can get a feel for their experience, not necessarily by their resume, but ask them how long they've been at it. Like with me, I've been a virtual assistant for over 12 and in the administrative world for over 20. So they'll know I've been around for a while, and nobody's an expert on anything. Sorry, Devin, but nobody's an expert on everything. But because there's always, always, always something new to learn. And I think that's what's great about getting a new client. No matter how much experience you have, someone always brings something new to the plate. And I'm a firm believer in never stop learning. The moment you stop learning, not only in business, but in life, you've had it. You're just done, And I just, because everybody does things differently. And no matter how many programs or software, what have you think there's always one out there you've never heard before. So it doesn't matter how much experience. But at the same time, that gives you a little feel for how long they've been around. They're not someone new just coming in and saying they know this and that, but they don't really. So that's another thing to kind of gauge what you're getting.
No, and I definitely think that's great advice. Now I'm going to flip it the other way. Is if you are looking for a virtual assistant or administrative assistant, are there any red flags, things that you're saying, okay, that's something I should definitely be watching out for, or if I see this come along, I probably shouldn't hire them? Is there anything that is a likely red flag?
If you see on their resume that they tend to go, again, from place to place to place quickly, say within a month or two of being hired, then there might be a problem. If this happens once or twice, it could be personalities. But if it keeps happening, then there's a bigger problem going on. So that's one thing you would want to learn about. And always ask for references, even if you don't get them. If people are kind of hesitant about giving you references, again, there could be a problem. Even if you don't get them, even if you don't really ask for them, but when you ask for in the interview, can you give me references? And they kind of hem and haw around. Well, maybe, I'll think about it. Then there's a problem, because there should be no problem giving anybody 3 or 4 or 2 or 3, whatever, references if you've been around long enough and you're proud enough of your work. So there shouldn't be any problem giving references.
No, and I think that, hey, if they're, if they're saying, hey, I'm just getting started, then be honest and say, I haven't been a virtual assistant or an administrative assistant. I'm here to learn. But then so they may say, I don't have references. But if they're, at least either way, they should be honest. If I don't have any references, then they should have a good reason. And I think, to your point, exactly, if they don't, then if they're hesitant, or it feels like they're hiding it, that certainly seems like there's something underlying that it would be a red flag.
Because if you're just starting out, and we all start out at some point, just be honest about it and say, I'm starting out, but I think you could be a good fit for me. If you're willing to give me a chance, then, here's what I can do for you. But I don't really have the references as of yet. Be honest about it. And that would be fine. But I've known too many people who have portrayed themselves in one way, and it turns out that they weren't. So you just, after you've been around a while, even with somebody in business, you kind of get a feel for what's going on. So, kind of your sixth sense, your instinct kind of kicks in.
No, it definitely makes sense. So one more question, then we'll start to wrap up. But on that note, so if I were to looking for hiring, I personally don't know, so I'd love to hear the answer. What kind of price ranges, or how do you even determine what to pay an administrative assistant or a virtual assistant? Because on the one hand, you want to obviously be fair to them, you want to hire or pay what they're worth, and the other hand, as with all business, you don't want to pay you don't want to overpay any more than you have to. So how do you kind of determine what is the pay and whether or not it's in office and it's administrative or virtual assistant, and whether how much they're working and what their experience? How do you start to figure all that out as far as what's a fair pay scale, or any thoughts or ideas?
To answer your one question, it wasn't kind of asked there, but it was kind of implied. How do you know if they're actually working for you? Most virtual assistants will use clocking software, so you'll know the number of hours that they're working and what have you. Virtual assistants, especially ones in the country, and you can get ones offshore, overseas, very, very cheap, but you have to be very, very wary. So even though those are cheap, some $5-10 an hour, just be careful of those. And I'm not just saying it because I charge a lot more. I'm just saying because they are offshore, they're not trained, or they're not experience-wise like those in the US or even other major countries. Because I've had clients all over the world, so I know what people can and can't do. But a good virtual assistant, and I'm talking about a general virtual assistant, those who specialize will charge even more. You can go anywhere from 25 to 75 bucks an hour, depends on, naturally those who are in like New York, Los Angeles, they will probably charge you more than someone like me who's from Ohio. So, I mean, I generally charge 35 to 40. And sometimes I give discounts depending on the situation. But I mean, it can be anywhere from $25 to $75. And those who specialize, those who are just graphic designers or those who build websites, they charge even more. But just a general, and I just consider myself a general virtual assistant who does a little bit of everything. I like doing documents and calendars and email and all that, but I don't really consider myself specialized. So those, again, would probably go anywhere from $25 to $75 an hour. And of course, as an independent contractor, they're responsible for their own taxes, their own equipment, all that stuff. You don't pay vacations or time off or anything like that. So that's one of the perks for the business owner. They don't have to pay all that stuff.
Definitely makes sense. So awesome. Well, we've covered a lot of great ground and a lot of fun there, but it's been a fun conversation. As we wrap up the podcast, I always ask one question at the end of each expert episode, which would be, if you're talking to somebody that's in a startup or small business and they're just looking to get started with virtual assistants or an administrative assistant, and they're just wanting to get started figuring out, trying to figure out if they need it or who to hire with that, what would be one step that they could take to get started?
Talk to maybe another business owner, or talk to someone. Just because you talk to a virtual assistant doesn't necessarily mean you have to hire them. If, someone wanted to contact me, I have these questions, that would be fine. I wouldn't mind talking to them, so, just ask around, ask people, or if you have emails for a virtual assistant, shoot them an email or if you're online, shoot them an email and ask them questions. If they're good enough and if they're classy enough, they will answer any questions that person has without expecting them to automatically become a client.
I like that. I think that's a simple answer, but it's a great one in the sense that go talk to a business owner that has done one, or a virtual assistant. And, even I like that, hey, it doesn't always have to be the expectation you're going to hire them and you just want to get a little bit feel for it, but asking those questions and talking with someone, I think is one of the best ways to get started. So I think that's a great answer. Yeah. Well, as we wrap up the podcast, if people want to reach out to you, they want to ask you questions, or they want to hire you, they want you to be their virtual assistant, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out or find out more?
Probably at my email, which would be Trish Lewellyn, which is my name. I try to make it difficult, 77@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, find out more. If they're in looking for a new assistant, definitely check Trish out, assuming she has availability, as well as to answer any questions.
But often, if that person doesn't, they might know someone who does. So, don't never hesitate to ask. Asking never hurts.
I think that's great advice. Well, thank you again, Trish, for coming on the podcast. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own expertise to share or your own journey to share, feel free to go to inventiveguest.com and apply to be on the show. Also, a couple more things as listeners. One, make sure to click subscribe in your podcast player so you know when all of our awesome episodes come out. And two, leave us a review so new people can find out about the podcast as well. Last but not least, if you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your business, reach out to us at Miller IP Law. Just go to strategymeeting.com. Thank you again, Trish, and I wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you very much. I fully enjoyed it.